We humans have an uncanny ability to constantly engineer new ways to divide ourselves. We are champions of all manners of man-made dividers. Fortified walls, moats, gates, locks, fences, doors, borders, security systems. And champions of the walls that are harder to see or touch. Passwords, codes, secrets, silence, prejudice, judgment, stoicism. We build them for defense, for security, for peace of mind, or for protection from both physical and emotional danger. What starts as a protective instinct, a way to guard our space, can often turn into a great chasm before we even get a chance to figure out why it is we're feeling lonely in our suffering. In his poem, The Mending Wall by Robert Frost, he reflects upon the obstacle that stands between him and his neighbor, the wall that they're mending on their property line. And he laments, "He is all pine and I am apple orchard. My apple trees will never get across and eat the cones under the pines," I tell him. He only says, "Good fences make good neighbors." Spring is a mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head. Why do they make good neighbors? Isn't it where there are cows? But there are no cows. Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give offense. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down. Good fences make good neighbors. We've all heard this expression, or many others that play on the same theme. It's no wonder that in our gospel lesson today, we first meet poor and hungry Lazarus outside of the gate of the rich man with a physical barrier between the two. In this case, I'm not sure Robert Frost would need to ask the rich man what it is he was walling in or walling out. One would assume that the rich man is walling in his possessions, his protection, or walling out maybe the stench of the beggar, perhaps the disease of his wounds. Perhaps the rich man was walling out any perceived danger that a man of Lazarus' stature might bring. On the surface, all of these things are probable, but I wonder if we were to dig a little bit deeper, how we might answer Frost's question about what the rich man was walling in or out. By walling out Lazarus, the rich man did not have to see a physical reminder to share of his great bounty with his neighbors who were in need. By walling in his heart, the rich man did not have to expose himself to the pain or the suffering of his neighbor. Fast forward to the scene after both men have died, and this time the rich man is the one who is suffering alone on the wrong side of a great chasm, as Lazarus is being warmly welcomed into the arms of Father Abraham. The roles and the circumstances have changed, but the heart of the rich man has not. He continues to be focused only on his own needs and those of his family. The rich man is still blind to Lazarus, which is evident by the way in which he speaks to Father Abraham to send Lazarus to do his bidding. In the afterlife, the rich man no longer has a fortified wall or gate to divide him from Lazarus, but it becomes all too obvious that in his blindness, even now, to see Lazarus as a man of worth, the rich man has instead created a great chasm that no one is able to cross. The rich man is so self-absorbed that he fails to see the bigger picture. He fails to see beyond his own need to the immense gifts he has to share with those around him. The rich man fails to see the role that he has to play in the community of God's kingdom, in the communion of God's people. And so he suffers alone. One of the fundamental promises that we each make in baptism is to respect the human dignity of every human being. The rich man never reaches a point of recognizing Lazarus as a human worthy of dignity or respect. He never sees Lazarus as a neighbor deserving of his love. Therefore, the rich man suffers alone in the silo that he has created for himself. So we turn from the story and we ask ourselves, what is it that we are walling in or walling out? How are we creating great chasms between ourselves and those around us? What are the fences we are building between ourselves and our neighbors? Perhaps in this digital age, we turn to social media because it's easier to be in touch about light matters with our friend who's 5 states away than it is to engage in the messy work of deep friendship with the one we are seeing face to face. Perhaps we build barriers with our busy schedules. By keeping busy, we choose to not have time for the things we would rather shield ourselves from doing. Until we wake up one day and realize that we've been running away from matters of the heart for so long that our calendars are running us into the ground. Or do we find ourselves hiding behind polite chatter, all the while avoiding asking the hard question or sharing the hard truth with someone we love because we're just too afraid to go there? Maybe it's the mask of, I'm fine, how are you? That we find ourselves using as a fortress around our hearts. Afraid that if we open the gates to the pain that lies just beyond the gate, we might show that we too have wounds that need healing. Now, it's easy to villainize the rich man in this story, but notice that Father Abraham, even after they die, still calls him child. It's easy to relish in the fact that Lazarus comes out on top in the end. And it's harder to hear the story and see ourselves on both sides of that gate, on both sides of the great chasm. Just as the rich man is being asked to see Lazarus as a child of God, we too are being called to see the rich man in that same light. We should not relish in his suffering any more than we wish for him to relish in the suffering of Lazarus. The chasm separating the rich man from enjoying the love of God's heavenly kingdom will be fixed until the day in which he turns and recognizes Lazarus as a man worthy of dignity and respect, as another child of God. We do not get to see the transformation taking place in this story, but we can hope and we can pray that it will. In the words of Frost, something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down. God's power working in us can pass through the strongest of gates. It can cross the greatest of chasms. It can tear down the most fortified of walls of fear and burst through all manners of separation. if we keep striving to turn our focus from ourselves to our neighbors, to the neighbors that we are called to love, then God can go about helping us to mend our connections as His beloved community, instead of spending our days mending walls. Amen.